Welcome back into another episode of Rock Boys Football. We are joined here with listener and special guest Mike Joseph. He is a avid listener to the show, and he knows quite a bit of college football himself as an OU fan and Big 12 fan. This episode, we are going to be talking about the potential of a 12-team college football playoff. We'll give you kind of our thoughts and ideas on what we like or dislike about the 12-team playoff and what it might look like if there were a 12-team playoff this year. What would the teams be making it in? My brother is not going to be able to be on the show today. We have a big storm coming in, and there's no power at our house. So we are joined with co-host Mike Joseph. Mike, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So let's just get right into it. What do you think about the 12-team college football playoff proposal?
I think it's a step in the right direction for sure for the league, because every year it always comes down to 4, 5, 6, and it seems not fair. Somebody feels like they should have been in, and they're so close and they can't make it. So giving some more teams opportunities. It's always so close between those top 6 teams, really. Like after that, maybe there's a little bit of a drop off, but I think each year 5 and 6 feel like they should have made it, and they don't get a chance.
And they normally have a good argument to make it, especially since there's 5 Power 5 conferences. So like there's one champion that's left out of the picture. You also throw Notre Dame in there that doesn't play a conference, and they always seem to make it in and just get pumped. Looking at like last year, we were talking about this before the show. Oklahoma, I feel like I would have rather seen Oklahoma play Alabama. Y'all probably weren't going to beat Alabama, but you probably would have put on a better show than Notre Dame did. So I guess that is like a positive about the 12-team playoff. I personally like it. For one, I just love good football, and I think this just makes some more good football. I also want to see some maybe smaller teams get a crack. I think we saw Cincinnati play Georgia really tough last year. I would like to see Cincinnati maybe get a chance to play a meaningful playoff game. Coastal Carolina, I don't know how good they would have done, but they would have been interesting to see in. And then there's always some deserving teams like Georgia, like Texas A&M, that, they're just not going to get past Bama and not going to win that SEC title. And they get left out when they're probably pretty deserving. So I like that. Mike, I know you were talking about, you think maybe an 8-game playoff would be better, or an 8-team playoff would be better. Why do you think that?
Yeah, I think 8's good. The biggest thing for me is that when it all comes down to it, the reason they did 4 is 4 best teams. And now if you go to 8, then I feel that like that solves a problem for the 5 and 6, which are always the big teams left out. 7 and 8 still get a chance. And then for me, I think, I'm all for 12, and I think it's a great step in the right direction for college football. But what it all comes down to for me, the biggest criticism is, it's number 11 and number 12, especially. Like, are those teams?
Yeah.
Do they really deserve a chance to play for it? And same for 9 and 10 to a lesser degree. Yeah. If you're still in the top 10, you're a good football team and you deserve probably a chance.
Yeah, I agree.
12 and 11.
Probably not so much.
You could have a 3-loss team at 11 or 12.
And realistically, like the gap between a top team like Alabama, Clemson, and Oklahoma, Georgia, and Ohio State is like, and then you go to 10, like there's a pretty substantial gap. You know what I mean? Like looking at what it might be this year, it might be like a Miami or Wisconsin. Those teams aren't going to beat an Alabama team. They're not going to beat a Clemson team most likely. And so like, are we really getting like a competitive game at that first round? I don't know. I like the idea that you're giving them a chance to, but what we've seen and what history showed us is those games might not be that competitive.
Yeah, I think they at least deserve a chance. but it kind of depends. It's kind of a year-to-year thing. You know, obviously you have to pick one format and kind of stick with it for a substantial amount of time. But year by year, I mean, you have teams getting left out, and I think
Yeah.
it's better to have teams that maybe shouldn't be in than and get the teams in that were just right on the cusp than just to have everybody not in it.
Yeah, and something me and my brother talked about when discussing the 12-team playoffs is we think, or at least in my opinion, and my argument for 12-team playoff is you might encourage some more out-of-conference scheduling that's like more exciting. So we're seeing a Clemson Georgia opening week this year, which is exciting, but we don't see enough of that. We see Alabama when they're not playing in the SEC, they're playing like freaking Alabama State. You know what I mean? They're playing some
Yeah.
FCS team that they roll, and it makes sense, right? Why take the risk of Why take the risk of going up and playing Ohio State when that could knock you out of the playoffs if you play a bad game? And so now you're giving those teams like, hey, if you lose a game, you're still going to be able to make the college. You could lose 2 games and still make the college football playoffs. And so maybe these teams will start scheduling some more exciting out of conference schedules as opposed to just those boring. Like my brother said, oh, Alabama Duke, that was an exciting one. Like, no, it's not. Alabama steamrolls Duke every time. So it's like maybe we can see a little bit more out of conference exciting games if you expand it to 12 teams. That's another thing that I think about. And yeah, just the overall year. I think I'm a big fan of the NFL draft, and you get to see a lot of top prospects play other top prospects that you might not see. For example, like Florida, all those guys sat out their bowl game when they would have been in the college football playoffs. And if we got to see like a Florida Ohio State matchup or something, that'd be exciting. So that's kind of why I'm in favor of it. We'll see what they actually do. I think it seems like it's going towards that direction, or at least expanding it to 8. So
yeah, they I think it was 10 days ago they reported that the commissioners were gonna discuss it, and then I think just about a week ago they said that they're moving forward with it. Just talking about all the options, and I think it's great that maybe it's nothing would happen for. I think they said the earliest anything could happen would be
2023, I
2023.
think. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
said
because of
too.
the contract.
Yeah, which
So
makes sense. You can't just like snap your fingers and make that happen. But I'm excited to see what they do. I hope they expand it at least to 8. I want to see a couple more teams get a crack at it. And yeah, just more good football games. I'm never going to complain about that. One other thing we could talk about is I know Joe in our group chat was talking about is that too many games for college athletes? I mean,
yeah,
in my opinion, like they're going to be going and playing 17 the next 2 years. You know what I mean? Whether they're going to the draft this year, next year. So it's like I'm not too concerned with they play 14 or 15 games instead of 13. I'm not too concerned about it. I've never played football at that level, so I obviously shouldn't be speaking too much about that. But it doesn't seem like that should be holding many people back.
yeah. I mean, all these programs. I mean, these are the best college athletes.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
they have the strength and conditioning and stamina to play
Oh
a
yeah,
couple
for
more
sure.
extra games. And if it's for a national championship, you know they'll be
Yeah, they're not
motivated to play the
complaining. They're not
games.
complaining about extra games. I know this year, like a couple of teams that I have buddies play for at Wake, they were kind of like out on the bowl game just because COVID. They hadn't seen their families. It wasn't even going to be fun. Like normally, bowl games are just fun. You know what I mean? You go for a week to Hawaii or Florida or whatever, and it was just. I mean, with all the protocol, it wasn't that fun. So, anyways, moving on. We're going to give you a hypothetical. If we were to implement a 12-team playoff, who do we think is going to be in and out? And we'll give you our seeds. I'll start off with mine. This is controversial. This is a little bit of my pet cat team for this year, and it's the Georgia Bulldogs. I think they're going to run the table. I think they're going to go undefeated. I think they maybe lose one game, but I think they win the SEC this year. That team is, I don't know if you've been listening to the early podcast, I'm a huge fan of Georgia. That defense is super talented. Defensive line sick. They brought in that Clemson transfer, Darian Kendrick. I don't see, I mean, looking back in history, like what's one thing that stopped Georgia? It's their quarterback play. and they haven't had a quarterback to really. Jake Fromm was okay, but he wasn't going to win you a national title. In comes JT Daniels. That team started scoring at the end of the year. And so I think they have a really good shot to win the SEC and clinch that first seed. Who would you pick as your first seed, Mike?
Number 1 overall.
Gonna go with the Chalk. Gonna go with Bama.
Well, it's tough. Bama, I mean, we know for sure, almost with certainty, we're going to have Bama, Clemson, and probably Ohio State.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, for the top overall seed, if you look at a team that could easily cruise to maybe a 1-loss season, it's probably Clemson, because ACC is not super tough. They'll be challenged, but they won't be challenged like they've been before.
Yeah.
It'll all be, they have a new quarterback, the DJ, and he's got potential. He hasn't really shown much.
Yeah.
He played 1 or 2 games, but they always have the talent.
Yeah, they will have the talent around him for sure, and that defense is sick too. I like Clemson. The thing is, they played Georgia week 1, and I think Georgia's
that's going to be a great matchup.
The opening odds were, I think Georgia was plus 4.5. I am going to hammer that. I think Georgia's going to flat out win the game. I think this Georgia team is really good. Clemson has a lot of turnover on that offensive side of the ball. And what's the one thing we saw Clemson get exposed at against Ohio State? Their offensive line. I mean, they were getting abused up front. And those Bulldogs, I mean, Georgia is probably the best defensive line in the country this year. So if we're looking at just like a matchup in this game, that's something to look at. So
we're looking at a Clemson team that potentially could start 0-1, but then could
run the table. Yep,
cruise the rest of the way.
Oh, they won't lose another game. I don't think. So Clemson will be a top 4 team. I have them at my 3 seed, and I have OU. And I think I have OU because I don't think they'll lose. I think they'll be undefeated. So if Georgia and OU go undefeated, I think Georgia's going to get that top seed, which I don't know. Georgia's kind of a boost to go undefeated because they play some tough games, and they'll have to play Alabama in the championship game.
It's tough. It's tougher in the SEC, and the committees. Maybe, I don't know if I want to say biased, but
they're definitely biased, straight up biased,
they love the SEC.
They love the SEC. So if Georgia runs the table, they'll lock up. And it's the same thing for Alabama. So I have Alabama on my 5 seed because they can't be a top 4 seed if they don't win their SEC title game. But anyways, so you could easily put in OU at 1. I love OU, Mike. You can talk a little bit about OU too, but I watched the Iowa State OU film from the Big 12 championship game, and they got some – I mean – the one thing that we've kind of seen OU get held back by is their defense. It hasn't been great when they play some of those better teams. They always can score with the big dogs, but they can't really stop them. This OU defense is legit this year. I mean, you get Magneto, Winfrey. That guy just got arrested. One of those OU guys on the line, right? Isaiah Thomas just got arrested.
Yeah, he got in trouble. They always have something. They played
they'll be fine.
When they played that Rose Bowl game against LSU. Not Rose Bowl, but Peach Bowl, played LSU, and a week before the game, Stevenson, the running back who was drafted by the Patriots 4th round.
Oh, that's right. And his
year,
suspension carried over, I believe.
Yeah, he got suspended, and another player right before. It probably wouldn't have changed anything. They still got rocked, but they have to be more careful about that type of stuff.
You need your players to play, but I think that OU team is really good, and the only game I see them getting challenged by is Iowa State. I don't think that Big 12, especially with Texas kind of turning over with Ellinger, new head coach, Oklahoma State's kind of gutted. That Big 12 conference in general is not that good, and so I have OU running the table. So if OU runs the table, they're going to be a top 2 seed. So
I agree. I think if they take care of their business, which I feel like I say this before every season, like,
it's big facts.
If we take care of our business, we will be in the playoff. But this year, I mean, they returned so much talent, both sides of the ball.
So much talent, yeah.
They should be. They really don't have excuses. They should be on top of their game.
I know you guys got 2 transfers from Tennessee, I believe. One, the running back, Eric Gray, who should be good, and then you get Brooks coming back. But yeah, so OU, I think they're locked to be a top 4 seed. They'll win the Big 12, maybe drop a game because they historically always seem to do so. But I don't think that'll hold them back from being a top 4 team.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So we got Bama/UGA at one of the top 4 seeds. We have Clemson, who's going to win the ACC. We have OU, and then the 4 seed's got to be Ohio State, right? Like I think they'll take care of business in the Big 10. Maybe drop a game, but they'll win the Big 10 if I had to guess and clinch that 4 seed.
Yeah, Big Ten always gives them the toughest run, and they prevail almost every year. I mean, they've been in the last few playoffs.
2016, I believe, is the last time they haven't won the Big 10. Or 2017 is one of the two. But yeah, I mean, the big question mark is they're super talented. They returned 2 of the best tackles in the country, headlined by Thayer Munford, who's first-team All-American preseason. 2 of the best wide receivers in the country in Olave and Wilson. We kind of talked about them in the Big 10 breakdown the episode ago, but they just got to answer C.J. Stroud. I mean, is that new quarterback? Is he going to be – they just need him to be average. I know I've said this before, but he doesn't need to be anything special for this team to win the Big 10. He just needs to be decent.
Yeah, he needs to not turn the ball over and know the playbook, and
that's
he's
all
got
he
everything
really needs to do. He's a
around him.
top 50 recruit. I think Ryan Day will get him in there just fine. So I think we have our 4 seeds locked up, probably coming from the SEC, probably coming from the Big 12, the ACC, and the Big 10. And so now we get to our at-large bids. Well, we have two other conference champions. I'll say them right now. I have Cincinnati at 7 winning the AAC, and then I have Coastal Carolina fitted in at 10. And many of you at home are probably like, what's the deal with Coastal Carolina? They return almost every player on that team from last year, that team that beat BYU, almost beat Liberty. That's a good ball club, good program. And you look at their schedule, like nobody's going to play them tough besides Louisiana in that conference championship game. But I don't see them losing. I mean, Grayson McCall is back. And so if they go undefeated, can you leave them out?
That's the thing with this expanded playoff. Now we finally, if there's a team like Coastal Carolina, UCF, Cincinnati, that every year complains
that they
not being in when they don't have the schedule. Now this opens the door for them these teams to finally prove if they really deserve to be playing with the big dogs.
If my brother was here, he'd just throw up in his mouth because he's not interested in seeing a Cincinnati team. He's not interested in seeing the Coastal Carolina team line up against the Bama, which, I mean, to that I say Coastal Carolina I don't think has a great shot. But, I mean, we saw Cincinnati play Georgia really close in that bowl game. Granted, Cincinnati's probably all geared up to play, and Georgia probably has no interest in being there. But, I mean, they played well. Desmond Ridder looked good. The defense looked solid. So, I mean, I think Cincinnati's going to be good this year. So, I wish there was an 8-game playoff or a 12-team playoff this year to see them get a shot. But I have them at my 7. And so 5, I said I either had Bama or Georgia. Whoever loses the SEC championship game will be slated at 5. And 6, I had that fellow Big 12 rival, Iowa State. I think they only lose 1 game, and that's going to be to Oklahoma. They play them in the regular season too, so they'll lose 2 games to Oklahoma, maybe even split one. But
they could split one. I don't know if it's in Norman or at Iowa State, but
it'll be in Norman this year because I remember watching the game in Ames. I had big money on Oklahoma. That was some baloney. But yeah, I have Iowa State. I think you can't penalize them that hard losing to OU. And I mean, that Iowa State team is solid. They return almost every guy. And again, as I said in the former podcast, like, the stars are aligning for that team. They get everybody back. Pretty much. They lose a couple guys, 1 guy on the D-line, and then 1 backup running back, I believe. And that's really all they're losing from the producers. So that Iowa State team is going to be tough. They just have to be consistent. They don't have any lenience. They can't drop any other games than OU, though.
Yeah, they have Brees Hall, who was like their main
You're
offense.
sick. I love
Yeah,
it.
he was the offense for the most part.
He literally he had like he's gonna and this year. I mean, I think he'll have over because they used that running back too. I forget his name. He got drafted by the Vikings, so he got drafted as an RB2, and they gave him a decent amount of touches. So Brees Hall, I feel like, is gonna get like 300 touches, whether it be in the air or on the ground. He's a savage.
Yeah, they're going to use him, and then they have their quarterback Brock Purdy. He'll be back.
And tight ends.
So.
And they just have those like monster tight ends. Like they're not that athletic, but they're just like Charlie Kohler. I think's a first team. He's a first team All-American this year, preseason, and he's just a big target in the middle of the field for Brock Purdy. And so that team's just seems so solid. And so we have Cincy at 7, and then Texas A&M is going to be at 8. Mike, I don't know if you know much about Texas A&M this year, but I really like this team. They pretty much return almost a lot of their talent, besides Kellen Mond, obviously. And they're gonna have to see who can step up between Haynes King and Zach Calzada, I believe. But that defense is going to keep them in games.
They've been quietly getting better each year since they've had Jimbo Fisher. And I mean, the record's kind of been the same each year, but you can tell when you watch them play that their players are learning the system more, and
they're recruiting way better. If you look at their last couple of years with Kevin Sumlin, they were just kind of falling off the cliff with the recruiting, and Jimbo Fisher's got him back in like top 8 recruiting classes every year. So getting better athletes. Jimbo Fisher's a great coach. I don't know if you watched our top 10 coaches, but we both had Jimbo at 3, I believe, behind Dad and Nick Saban. He's a phenomenal coach. I mean, he's a great coach at Florida State. He's bringing back this A&M team too. So
yeah, he's bringing them back. I mean, they were pretty much rock bottom before he got there. I mean, it's a program that was also one time one of the best every year consistently, kind of fell off, and
I missed that.
He's bringing them back slowly, but they're improving.
But I think, I mean, I don't see them beating Alabama, so they don't get into the SEC title game from the West. And so Texas A&M is one of those teams that they need this 12-team playoff because like they're not going to beat Alabama on a regular basis. And so they're going to always be left out. You know what I mean? Unless they go undefeated besides losing one game to Bama, they might get a 4th seed. But like there's going to be so many years where they're getting left out of the conversation. And it's kind of out of their control once they lose to Bama. It's like if Ohio State runs the table, wins the Big Ten, they're left out. So A&M is one of those teams that consistently will be in the playoffs if they expand to top 10 or to 12-team playoffs.
Yeah, if they can run the table and only drop one game to Alabama, and they should have an impressive enough resume
to get for the 4th seed, or is that for the 12-team playoff?
Just for the 12.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think
there's going to be two. There's going to be 2. Alabama, probably Georgia are going to be ahead of them the whole year in the SEC.
Yeah.
So
they're not going to put a 3rd. I mean, I wouldn't put it past the committee in a 4-team playoff, but it's like Texas A&M just squeezed out.
SEC's probably the biggest winner because even when it was a 4-team, they already were getting. It was 1 year for sure, maybe twice. They got two teams in, and one of them wasn't even didn't even play in the championship game. So and they always have at least 3 teams, maybe 4, and it's like competing for the top 15.
Yeah, I agree. So that's actually a really good point you bring up. If we're looking at like what conferences like gain the most, it's definitely the SEC because I mean you're looking at we could very easily add Florida to this list and have 4 SEC teams in the 12-team playoff. Yeah, I mean, so there's no other conference in the country that's going to put 4 teams in, and the SEC might consistently do that if we expand to 12 teams. So the SEC, I'm sure, is lobbying hard for some more representation. So
there will be drama, and it'll all be around SEC.
Yeah. And even like when you do 12, like there will be the 13 and 14 teams are complaining.
Yeah.
But it gets less important because then it's like, okay, does UNC really are we really tripping that hard about UNC getting left out? Like they're not going to compete. But
Yeah, I think it's good. 12 teams, it answers a lot of the controversial questions each year when they do the top four. There's all the weeks after, it's, all the talk about comparing mainly the 5 and 6 teams that don't get in, and then usually the Coastal Carolina, UCF,
yeah,
smaller
exactly.
school that
Gives them a
don't get
chance
in.
at least. Like at least we're gonna see one of those teams a year. Even if we go to 8, you'll see a Cincinnati, you'll see a UCF, you'll see a maybe Coastal, like a small, a non-Power 5 team get in, which is kind of what you want. I at least in my opinion, my brother would differ, but I wouldn't mind seeing one of those teams get a chance every year.
I think they at least deserve the opportunity, and then, maybe they don't even get in. Maybe no teams do well enough to get in,
Yeah,
but they
yeah,
at least have the opportunity, and then,
yeah.
the fans will get to see
Do you think
watching if they deserve it or not based on the game.
putting our top 12 list on hold, do you think it'll affect recruiting at all if they move to a 12-team playoff? Like so many teams are like, I want to, or players in high school are like, I want to compete for a national championship game or championship. Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State. Like, do you think maybe if we move to this 12 teams, like team or top of these top players are maybe like, okay, maybe I'll go to an Iowa State. Maybe I'll go to a UNC. Maybe I'll go to a Miami. You know what I mean? Do you think that'll affect it or not really?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it definitely should affect it, because it probably every year there's top prospects that they're thinking about their future in the NFL and the draft, and they want to go to play for Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, programs that put out 5 to 10 draft picks every year, and are also competing for national championships. But if you expand the opportunity, more teams are going to get to be seen on the big stage, and these players are going to get more opportunity to show themselves. I think that there's a lot of players every year, a lot of recruits, that it probably comes down to somewhere they really like, and if they're good enough, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. And if they're good enough and you have an offer to go to one of those 3 schools, like,
you're taking that,
they're going to go. But if you know with a little more certainty, I mean, nothing's ever guaranteed, but if you know that you could potentially be on like an Iowa State or North Carolina, or maybe like an Oregon or USC from the Pac-12, it opens a door for recruiting. And I think
absolutely,
it would make the decision tough for a lot of the recruits.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you're kind of right. These 4 or 5-star top 100 recruits, they care about what school they go to, but they care more about in 3-4 years, are they going to be hearing their name called in the NFL draft? So I don't know how much it'll affect it. I think it might maybe a little, but the best recruiting pitch that you can give to an athlete is, we will help develop you to be an NFL player. So will that ever change? Like Saban, Dabo Swinney, Ohio State, they do that better than anybody. So
yeah, exactly. Like just because they may have the opportunity to be on the big stage and get more recognition doesn't change the fact that they could be playing for a Saban or Dabo or one of the premier coaches.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. That's an interesting thing to think about. That this will affect maybe some recruiting. So continuing, we got 4 more teams that are going to round out our 12-team playoffs. I have Miami at 9, and this is another team that if you've been listening, am a big fan of. I like what Manny Diaz is doing down in Miami, but I also like what they're returning. And so they're returning all 5 of their linemen. Derek King hopefully can get back from that ACL injury. But my biggest thing is they kind of missed out on a big X wideout who could like catch balls and run clean routes and get open. They had a bunch of speedsters who were good athletes, but never really that go-to target. They bring in Charleston. Oh, you're familiar with him, Charleston Rambo.
Rambo is
he's a great receiver. He's really good. He kind of just got squeezed out. I know he got in trouble there, and Marvin Mims obviously kind of capitalized on that. But he's really good from what I've seen on film. And then at the spring practice in Miami, he was doing really well. So I love that addition. I think they're going to be better than UNC, so I think they're going to be a one loss. They'll probably lose to Bama and then lose to Clemson. But if they win every other game besides losing to Bama first week and then Clemson in the championship game, I think they can squeeze in. And so that's kind of another one of those teams that get helped out by these 12-team playoffs. But I have them 9. And then, what we talked about after the show is Coastal Carolina at 10. And you'll see no Pac-12. So apparently the rule is that it's the 6 highest ranked conference champions. And this year, kind of similar to last year, we were talking about this before the show, the Pac-12 is kind of, I wouldn't say it's bad, but there's not a heavy favorite like Oregon has been the last couple of years. And so what I see happening is they kind of beat each other up. Arizona State beats USC, USC beats Oregon, UCLA maybe takes – I think there's 3 top teams in Oregon, Arizona State, and USC, pending Arizona State's recruiting violations.
Right.
Which are apparently pretty significant. But regardless, those 3 teams are kind of the best teams in the conference, but none of them are that good. And so I could see an Oregon dropping 2 or 3 games. And so even if they drop 3 games, win the Pac-12 though, do they get in? Are they going to be ranked higher than Coastal Carolina? I mean, I don't know.
It's going to be controversy. I mean, when they first reported this this proposal of the new system, I mean, I think it was ESPN, Heather Dinich said, if you do, I think the original proposal was top 5 Power 5 conference champions get automatic bids, but then you would have had Oregon, who would have been
sucked.
In the 20s, who was the Pac-12 champion and getting an automatic bid. So it doesn't work. So I think the system of top 6 conference champions is good. I think it also opens the door for a lot of controversy though, because
it certainly does.
If you have a conference champion that hasn't played anybody, and
exactly.
you have someone that's
are we really going to put them in? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think we can both agree there's no way to remove all the controversy. Every year there's going to be a team that has
no matter what. There's going to be critics.
Can you maybe limit it? Can you just make it better? I think expanding it from 4 makes it better. Because, I don't know, these kids are 18, 20 years old. You might have a bad game. And should that one bad game you play – think of OU, for example. They played 2 bad games. One against a good team in Iowa State who they beat down the road. Are you going to they don't have a chance to get in now. And so is that a fair system where it's they were probably the 4th best team in the country. They just played a bad game against Kansas State, who they beat 99 times out of 100. So I don't know. I like how they expanded it. There's still going to be controversy.
The controversy will never be avoided.
No, it won't be. But
the critics will be critics.
Exactly, like my brother. My brother's just a hater. So does a team like Coastal get in? If that is true, my brother will be up in arms. He'll be pissed about it. He also says that it takes emphasis off regular season games, which I guess it does in a way, but I don't necessarily think that's terrible. Okay, moving out since we're pushing on 40 minutes. Wrapping up 11 and 12. I have Wisconsin at 11. I like Wisconsin with Graham Mertz. I think it'll be like Wisconsin that we normally see, where it's they're solid, they run the ball well, they have a little bit better of a quarterback in Graham Mertz who can give a little bit more firepower. And then they'll lose to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, but that won't hurt them bad enough where they fall outside. And so I have them squeaking in at 11, and then I have Arizona State at 12, but who could be replaced by a Notre Dame and Indiana. I don't know. It gets kind of fuzzy with 11 and 12 because those teams just aren't we were kind of talking about it. Those teams just aren't that good.
It could be a 3-loss team if it's someone in the SEC or maybe Big Ten.
Yeah, Indiana could lose. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of, it might even get more complicated because it'll be that's when it kind of tightens up. So like the 12th and 11th best teams in the country, like they're not much better than the 15th or 16th best team in the country. Like there's
Exactly.
kind of bunched up. It gets a little spread out at the top, but so there'll be arguments. Yeah, this year I have, I guess, Arizona State squeaking in from the Pac-12, but I could certainly see a scenario where the Pac-12 would get left out if they don't have if Oregon doesn't get back to their dominant ways, or USC doesn't get back to their dominant ways. You might just kill each other, beat each other up, and then get left out. Especially with a historically kind of weaker conference. So like the Big Ten or the SEC beats up on each other. That's a historically strong conference, and so they won't get penalized as much for 2 or 3 losses as a Pac-12 team.
Yeah, I think this year I have some faith in the Pac-12. They started the season late last year and had all kinds of issues, football and non-football related. I think having a full back to normal season for the Pac-12, I think one team will
Get in,
run the table and probably be the clear winner. I think it's going to be USC or Oregon.
Yeah, I think those are the 2 best teams. My problem is there's just not. I mean, so look at Oregon. I think Oregon has the most talent on that team. They've been so reliant on like a stud quarterback. Like Herbert's been there for like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And he was kind of carrying the weight on offense. And now you saw last year they had Tyler Shaw, who just he wasn't Justin Herbert. He wasn't bad by any means, but he wasn't Justin Herbert. And now they'll have Anthony Brown, who's a transfer from BC, who doesn't throw the ball particularly well. So it's like, are they going to be consistent enough to like win or like not drop 2 or 3 games? I have question marks about them. They're obviously sick talent-wise, like Kevon Thibodeau. I know Noah Sewell is really good. And then USC is kind of the opposite. They're less talented. They lose a lot of talent in the draft, but they do have a very good quarterback, Keaton Slovis.
I think the opportunity is there for one of the teams to handle their business and earn a spot in an expanded playoff. But, like you said, there's just each team has their own problems, and the competition level is, at least of the top teams that would have an opportunity, the competition level it's tight on those teams. So the opportunity is there for each of them. It's just a matter of if they can prevail each game.
Yeah, which is so close
ones and not lose one by 1 point at the end of the year and just totally derail everything for the whole conference.
Yeah, and I always feel like that, especially in the Pac-12. It's like I like come back or like flick on the game at like midnight, and Oregon's going into like double OT with like Utah. It seems to be close games.
I think I can't remember. I think it was either last season or the season before. Oregon lost to Herm Edwards in Arizona State.
Right.
I think it was 2 years ago.
Yep, 2 years ago before COVID.
Yeah, if they would have won the game, they would have been in.
They would have been.
And then they lost.
I remember. Yeah.
And it just totally.
And it was like a close one. It was like a last-minute field goal fire call. It wasn't like a blowout. Like they just like lost on a. Yeah, that's the harsh reality of the 4-team playoff format that we have going now. And I think that's why many critics of the 4-team playoff, including myself, want to see that change. Like, I mean, like Oregon was a good team. That was, Penei Sewell, Justin Herbert. They had some good ball players on that team, and they get left out because one, I don't want to call it a fluke game, but one tough game. That's a damn shame.
Yeah, I think a good system, and unfortunately, it's something probably that would never be reality. But if each conference could have 2 divisions like they do, like in the SEC and ACC, I think if each conference could have something like that, these teams wouldn't have to. And I know the Big 12 does have a system like that, but their teams cross over a lot, so they play teams in the other division.
Yeah.
So I think if each team though had a nice East, West, North, South, however they want to call it and divide it. I think that would, and assuming they can keep it fair and not have all the good teams, on one side. But I think if each of the Power Five could do something like that, then you wouldn't have these teams that are just completely beating up on each other, and these one close game that may come down to the last minute of the fourth quarter field goal, and then that's it for the team that,
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. I think because then they don't even, if something like that happens, they don't even get a chance at their conference championship, because it's only, honestly, I think the only conference might just be the Big 12.
That doesn't have it. I believe it is.
Yeah. I know the Big 10, and I think the SEC have they have a lot of teams, so it works pretty fluently.
Yeah.
I think that
the only problem is, like, at least in the Big 10, it's so uneven. Like, there's maybe not last year because Michigan, Penn State had a down year, but most years it's Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, back when Michigan State was good, and then Indiana. So it's 5 really good teams all in one division beating up on each other, and then you had Wisconsin is always winning the Big 10 West. So I mean, I don't know how you do it. Do you change it from year to year to make it more evenly distributed? But I don't know.
Yeah, I think, if there was a way for them to just totally maybe plan, it's something that would take, maybe 10 years. But I think if they really played around with the playoff, go 8 or 10 or 12, play around with it, and maybe in 10 years after they've seen what playoffs like with 4 teams, and then maybe 8 or 10 or 12, then I think that would maybe open the door for some conference, some alterations of how it works. Because I think the original thing was all the Power 5 champions are in, but you can't. That's just not gonna work when you have a Pac-12 champion that's in the 20s.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, and unfortunately, the NCAA just moves so slowly with everything. So there's good changes to be made. They won't be made that quickly. Hopefully they make the right changes, even if they don't happen that quickly. I like the direction where it's going, and I do agree there's some flaws with it. But I think it's a good step in the right direction. Yeah.
If you have to pick between, 4 and 12, I think every college football fan is going to pick 12.
Besides my brother, who is just a dang shame that he couldn't be on, because he would be giving it to us. But
yeah, we'll have to run it back and get it.
We might have to do a little bonus episode and give Dale a chance
Part
to
two.
voice his opinion. But yeah, I think we talk for most fans. We want to see more football. We want to see better football. I think the 12-team format does that. We kind of broke it down. There'd be a lot of intriguing games. We'd see Bama play an Indiana, which would be fun. We'd see a Cincy play Miami. There's just fun games, that out-of-conference games that we'd see in a 12-team format. So that's kind of all we have for today's episode. Thanks, y'all, for listening. Mike, thank you for filling in on my brother. It was a pleasure to have you, and we'll for sure be having you for during the season when we're making picks week.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Absolutely.
I think we're
doing it again.
Put out a great episode.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, peace.
All righty.